Welcome into Vandy on SI. I'm Joey Dwyer. Got the whole gang here this morning. Normally it's just me and Dylan, but Graham is here full time now. We'll be here every day, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Big week for us though. All three of us in the press box on Saturday. We're gonna have to toy with some angles to get all three of us in the post game again, but we're gonna do it for our lovely listeners, you guys. Today, second day of Clark Lea's availability on the week ahead of Utah State. Again, a game that Vanderbilt has really emphasized not looking ahead. Jordan Matthews said he didn't even know if they were playing Alabama the week after. MK Young talked about one climb at a time, things along those lines. I think that's the message of the week for this Vanderbilt team. But Dylan, before we kind of get into more Utah State, proud of you for asking some injury questions, as am I with Graham. But Issa Wataha downgraded to doubtful. Jamison Curtis out on the week. Dylan, give us a synopsis of what you heard on Issa Wataha.
Yeah, so Wataha's injury, we got a little more information than we have in previous weeks. It is a shoulder injury that he's dealing with, and Clark Lea basically said they're not going to put him out there till he's 100%. He said it's not really an injury that he can go out there and re-injure. It's just about getting strength back in that shoulder. He said when they threw him out there against Virginia Tech, they wanted him to test it out, and they found out pretty quickly on the first drive he played that he didn't really have strength in that shoulder yet. Clark mentioned the possibility of maybe some surgical options down the road. He said for now, they're really playing the wait-and-see game, seeing if he can kind of get strength back in that shoulder, and if that happens and when that happens, they'll put him back out there. But for now, it sounds like we're going to be, or they're going to be working without Wataha, at least for this week where he's listed as doubtful. But it sounded like that's more of a long-term thing going forward as well. Besides that, and the Jamison Curtis injury, which is soft tissue injury that he injured last week, perhaps on his touchdown. I'm not sure. Clark didn't mention that specifically, but they're pretty healthy besides that. So outside of Wataha, which is definitely seeming a little bit more long-term than maybe we initially thought, they are in a pretty good spot health-wise, I'd say.
Sure. I think we talked about the golden era on Monday. I think for things to break right for a team, a lot of it is health, and I think it's been pretty good for Vanderbilt to this point. I think that's something that we've kind of noted throughout the year, and maybe we haven't talked about enough, that they really have been healthy to this point. Though they're going to start to wear down Graham, and to me, they just got to get through this week. Everything they want is still ahead of them. They got to go beat Alabama and LSU, but before they even attempt to do that, got to beat Utah State, a team that has a lot of explosive qualities as an offense. Clark Lea said on Tuesday that they watched Utah State's 40-yard plays as a team. A lot of it was due to defensive confusion, things along those lines. What do you make of the matchup for Vanderbilt and kind of the approach throughout the week?
Yeah, so with Utah State's offense, what they like to do is they like to start with the run game, establish the run game, and from there go and with their passing game and just create the explosive plays out of maybe the play action or just whatever running game that they have established. And so number one thing that Clark had said on Tuesday is, look, we got to make sure that we can control this run game, because if they don't, then it can create explosive plays out on the perimeter for Utah State. So number one is focus on the run game and make sure you can get them into third and longs, third and mediums, where they're basically forcing to pass the ball and where it's very predictable offense is what Clark Lea is looking to get to. And that's the main thing. Control the run game, and then from there you'll be able to control the pass game, and then it should be good from there.
Sure. Dylan, our schematic expert on the podcast, tell us what you're expecting from Vanderbilt's offense this week. And talked to Caleb Barnett today. He said he didn't even expect to play this much this early. Feel like we could see some of him this week. Feel like it's going to be a week where Tim Beck uses a lot of personnel.
Yeah, absolutely. And the offense has been so surgical up to this point through 4 weeks that it's hard to even point out what's worked and what hasn't, because pretty much everything has worked. But I would say key would be establishing the run early again, which they have. You'll definitely see some of those gadget plays using guys like Barnett. Tristan Brown played a good bit last week, as did a lot of guys, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see some more Tristan Brown on the field. I think they'll work to establish the run early, kind of similar to what Utah State's plan is going to be. They've had faced zero kind of trouble in the run game. I think the interior offensive line has been pretty incredible in terms of opening up holes for Cedric Alexander, MK Young, James L. Lassiter, AJ Newberry. So I think they're going to focus on the run game, establishing that early, to then create, again, those more explosive plays. And I think you'll see Diego throw the ball more. I think he's getting more comfortable, and more importantly, Tim Beck is getting more comfortable in just dropping him back and letting him make a decision. It seems like the past couple weeks they've had a lot of success in the drop back pass game, and I think a lot of that stems from the fact that if Pavia's first read isn't there, he looks at his second read. If his second read isn't there, then he goes outside the pocket and has 20 yards to scramble with. So it seems like, they faced a lot of success, and Utah State's, I think, offense is definitely the strength of its team.
For sure.
So I think the key is going to be, foot on the gas on offense. They should be able to win this game pretty easily just by running the ball and not getting crazy. I think not turning the ball over would be the key, protecting that football, because if Vanderbilt's going to lose this game, it's going to be because their defense let up a lot of points, and if that happens, then they're going to need their offense to score and not make mistakes. So I think you'll see a somewhat conservative style of offense to start things out. But
sure. And Dylan, I think I'm going to sound like a broken record here. This isn't a matter of talent or even in a lot of ways, it's not a matter of execution. It's a matter of, is Vanderbilt ready to go beat Utah State? Is Vanderbilt still focused on Georgia State and what it did there and is riding high off that? Is it looking ahead to Alabama? If those things are the case, then maybe it's a lot closer than the 22.5-point spread.
Right.
If Vanderbilt's locked in on this game and we don't have any really reason to believe that it's not, I would expect it to be a somewhat significant margin.
Yeah.
We mentioned the Utah State defense. I think it's the first year under former Vanderbilt defensive coordinator Nick Howell, who did struggle in his last year. His last year was the 2-10 year before Clark kind of took over the defense. There's a lot more to that story than I think people realize. A lot of personal matters with Nick Howell that I think have to be accounted for there, but still trying to build the culture defensively at Utah State, still trying to give them an identity, and kind of see that Texas A&M scored 44 points against them. Even their wins, I think Air Force scored 30 points against them. Still a lot to be desired from that defense, and feels like it could be a day again where if Vanderbilt's locked in offensively, if it's executing well, could be another explosive day.
Yeah, you would definitely hope so. But I think, going back to the A&M game that Utah State played, you got to remember it was 17-6. With about 4 or 5 minutes left in the third quarter, then A&M scored a couple late touchdowns in the third quarter, and there was just sort of game from there. But this Utah State defense has shown to, give a team like A&M a scare. So if you're Vanderbilt, you gotta keep your foot on the gas. You gotta keep, be on your toes and just be prepared, because this Utah State team is sneaky good. And again, with their offense, they're top 20 in passing efficiency and with yards per completion as well. So this Utah State team has to be taken seriously. And again, like you said, we don't have reason to believe that Vanderbilt's not taking them seriously. I believe they are. And
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people call this like a trap game, like on Twitter and whatnot, and I don't think this is your like prototypical trap game where it's like a team, like Vanderbilt's riding high, taking a team, not seriously, and then the other team comes in and wins, kind of like what happened with Vanderbilt and Alabama last season. I don't think this is your prototypical trap game. I think Vanderbilt is a far superior team than Utah State, and I think they've done a lot in the building, and Clark Lea has done a lot to, again, preach this mentality that we've been talking about where it's one game at a time. So, make no mistake, if Vanderbilt goes out there and plays the game that they're capable of playing at a very baseline level, they should win this game, and it shouldn't be particularly close. But they have to go do that because Utah State is definitely better than the Charleston Southerns and even than Georgia State. It's probably the best non-conference opponent they have all season, except for maybe Virginia Tech if you're counting them. But I think going forward, that's got to kind of be the mentality.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. I was actually going to ask what you guys thought about that. There has been some talk about Utah State being the best non-conference game they have, or the most difficult. I still think Virginia Tech's probably a little bit more difficult, especially because they had to do it there.
Yeah.
I think Virginia Tech's bodies line up a little bit better with Vanderbilt's.
Yeah.
Just interested to pick your guys' brain about, is Utah State actually the hardest non-conference game they have? To me, it's Virginia Tech still, even with Virginia Tech's struggles. What say you, Grant Bacco?
Yeah, I would agree. I think Virginia Tech is still their toughest non-conference game that they've played.
You like that segue?
I did. That was a look I just gave. It was great. What say you?
And look, I think you also have to consider the atmosphere in which you play these teams. Like, Vanderbilt went to Virginia Tech. They went into one of the more hostile atmospheres in the country, whereas now you get to host a team like Utah State. It's not to discredit Utah State. I just think, the atmosphere in which you play these teams has a major role. And so I think going into Virginia Tech is certainly a lot more of a tougher game and atmosphere than facing Utah State at home.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, on
what say you, Dylan Tovis?
There you go. Now we're using it twice. On paper, I think Virginia Tech is certainly the better team, and at the point in the season where they played them, you could argue that after, the Old Dominion game, that
Yeah.
Virginia Tech kind of like completely lost it, and they fired Brent Pry and kind of became a mess. Like at the point where Vanderbilt played them, like they weren't yet at that stage. This wasn't yet a broken team, if you consider it now a broken team in terms of Virginia Tech.
They played pretty well against South Carolina.
They did.
Yeah,
they did. That was a game. So I would definitely say, apples to apples, that was a harder game to win under the circumstances. But that doesn't necessarily, to your point, Graham, discredit Utah State, and they've had a pretty good season so far. And they arguably have a better offense, more explosive offense than Virginia Tech did. Even if Virginia Tech has the bodies and the roster, maybe to stack up with Vanderbilt a little bit better. Maybe Utah State is lacking in some of that, but nonetheless, they're playing well as a team, and Vanderbilt has to go in there with their A game, I'd say.
Sure. Guys, Vanderbilt certainly capable of moving to 5-0 this week, moving up the AP poll. It's got to go take care of business against Utah State, though, and feels like it's prepared to do that. We're going to see on Saturday, all three of us. We'll be in the press box, excited to be back at First Bank Stadium 2 weeks in a row. Graham and I finally off the road a little bit, which is nice.
Dylan, and an early game too. That's nice.
Yeah. Dylan was scoping out the stands for us last week during family weekend. Now he's back. We're excited for this weekend. Thank you guys for watching. God bless, and we'll talk soon. Peace.